Nice to see you. Good morning. Happy Equinox in Australia. It's a big day. We say in the yogic life, in the yogic traditions, the equinox is the biggest day of your life. So I'm honored to be here. And it's a power day. It's a day where you can make huge kind of transformative quantum leaps. And I think that it is important, especially in times like these, that we make big intentions, and whatever happens between the intention and the reality is kind of left to the gods and left to the mystery. I had the great pleasure of interviewing a mythopoetic author named Michael Meade, who kind of led the charge in terms of really looking at how myth moves our consciousness and how it moves the timeless part of all of us. And I'm really interested in the interstellar myths and the cosmogenetics, as well as the myths of this planet Earth. But this equinox is a powerful day, and I'm talking about something that I've become very passionate about because of the current crises in mental health and pandemic and loss, and the fear of loss and the fear of death and the initiation that has happened in this past year, and where we are in terms of how we can utilize what's happening on the planet in a way that is going to help us help ourselves, and then help our communities and us show up for our families in different ways and be bigger and more expanded leaders. There's a question I always ask myself, and I was thinking about this because I'm writing my third book right now, and this principle and this conversation is part of it, which is when something's happening and someone is upset, or something's going on, or there's a challenge, or things aren't going my way, or whatever the thing is. I always ask myself, am I big enough? Is my heart big enough to expand around this too? And the answer is never no. The answer is always yes. I may not want to do it. I may not want to expand more, but the answer is always yes. I can expand more. I can get bigger. I can see things in a different way. I can be curious and actually make it a priority to be interested in the reality that infuses another person's lived experience, and on and on and on. So the answer has always been yes. I can expand. I may not want to, but I can. And I think when we're talking about what's happening in, I feel that part of this kind of fear of others' opinions and other people who see things differently than us and live differently than us, or have different politic or different opinions on, obviously the big conversation right now is medical freedom and what's ethical, both on the side of the corporation, the side of the doctors, the side of the citizen, and all of these kinds of things. But these big conversations and difficult conversations are just part of what living life on planet Earth right now is about. But I feel like part of the kind of inability to see things from multiple perspectives, and the lack of training and the lack of value that's put on this, is really connected to the stupefaction of the planet. It's connected to the kind of zombie washed out life that many people are, whether they know it or not, choosing to live. And me and Michael Meade were talking about the myth of death. And he said something very profound to me, which was that he said in the Irish kind of mythos, basically, and this runs through every myth, all creation myth has some sort of death myth involved and connected to it, because they're intrinsically connected. And he said that basically the Irish kind of proverb is, when death finds me, may I be truly alive. And I thought that was pretty good. And there was another one, he said something about death is always in a life well lived, death is always the middle and not the end. I thought that was good as well. So ultimately, we're working with a lot of people, because we have free will, and the human incarnation is a choice that we get to choose everything. It's free will. Many are deciding that they would rather live kind of in this living dead mythos of the zombie. I mean, it's not a coincidence that all the zombie apocalypse and the zombie movies and all of that is part of a very rich and current part of the entertainment, and some of the biggest shows on the networks right now are about zombies, and have been, this kind of apocalyptic future and the dystopian, and then we've now lived through some things that we hadn't a year ago. And so there's been, if we so choose, a certain type of initiation. And in that experience is the opportunity to expand our consciousness and to elevate ourselves to living a deeper, richer, fuller, more generous, more compassionate, more multifaceted life. And so the invitation is there. So this is one of the wonderful, positive, and powerful things that are happening from the kind of polarity of many of the things that we're experiencing and have been experiencing and will continue to experience. Because unfortunately, COVID-19 is not the last of the viruses that are going to riddle this planet, because of the things that were, not only because of the ways that we're living and the ways that we're out of nature and denatured with the planet Earth and her biology, but also because of, bioterrorism and all the other things that are kind of part of the modern zeitgeist. And so then we're kind of left as leaders and as women. I believe women have an innate responsibility, because our incarnation is the highest incarnation. And what I mean by that is that we are, when born into the female incarnation, the incarnation of woman, there is a certain type of incarnational, we'll call it, responsibility that comes with it. And so I think this is part of what we're seeing in terms of women. I'm calling it the fifth wave of feminism. In one way you could call it that, or you could look at it in a lot of different ways. But this is the kind of wholeness that has to happen with women coming into leadership and into responsibility, whether it's of your household or and it never left us, but there was we've had a little struggle here in the AD era. But before that, it was a matriarchy. I mean, this is the thing that I think people don't get. It's why it's important to look at the big cycles of time, is that there was a matriarchy and we fucked it up. Then there was a patriarchy and we fucked it up. And now the era that we're in, kind of post 2012, is it's not a matriarchy, it's not a patriarchy. It's a whole nother kind of evolution of the human species. And you're seeing that in some of the evolution of love and, gender non-binary and just all this. You're seeing an evolution of what can a human being love? What does a human being look like? How do we kind of live in an elevated way in the human incarnation? So back to the kind of multiple perspective conversation, the Buddha, Siddhartha, he goes out, he wants to do this enlightenment thing. And so he's meditating, and there's basically the myth goes that he meditates for 40 days. And that we know in yogic tradition, 40 days is kind of the number. There's like a very specific magic number to 40 days. So he meditates for about, 6 weeks, maybe coming on the 7th week. And his disciples, his students were there. And when he opens his eyes and is basically like in one phase of the enlightenment process, the first thing he says, the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, that's what it's called. The first turning of the wheel of Dharma is everyone is suffering. And so when we go back to these kind of timeless teachings and the teachings that go through the ages, it's a good place to start when you're just looking at compassion for other people's lived experience, for what they do or do not believe, or what they can and cannot fathom. Michael was talking about, and I'll just parrot him here, we are suffering a loss of imagination on this planet. And that may be one of the bigger kind of deaths that are happening than everything else, is the loss of imagination. Because if you can imagine it, if you can imagine that somebody else has a different kind of viewpoint or experience or belief system or culture or, all these types of things, then that the imagination is actually the kind of entryway into compassion. The imagination is the entryway into compassion. And so then even if you vehemently disagree with somebody, or if you feel like they're completely misinformed, or all of these things that the compassion, the heart being big enough to hold that lived experience, that reality that infuses their life, that whatever is all of what that is, what they are in that moment, then it just becomes a much different game. And I know this stuff is kind of, these truths remain self-evident in many ways, and it sounds very simple, doesn't it? But then you go on the internet, you go on this thing called the internet, and you just see what's going on in there. And it's a cesspool of againstness and canceling and self-righteousness and meanness and just kind of a whole low vibration situation. But I think what's fascinating, and I was telling this to somebody, I think what's fascinating that's coming out of this is a very rich thought and thought leadership that's happening, that is, because it's getting so ridiculous and so extreme that I think there's many are kind of going, whoa, wait a second. I may not have agreed with that person, or I thought that person was doing something wrong, or I wanted to, stand up against, whatever they believe in, or whatever they are touting, or, whatever I think is misinformation. But then, seeing how far the pendulum has swung around not being able to come to the table with intelligence, respect, and diligence and discourse, this creates degeneration in society. And so I think there's so much opportunity. There's a huge opportunity that we're sitting in right now to bring, when we're working with, the agenda of identity politic and the heavy discourse around identity politic, then, and woke culture and all this kind of stuff, what comes from that is the opportunity to really create a space where we can have major disagreements and major differences in lived experience and major kind of differences in politic, or our idea of medical, what you do about, COVID-19, or whatever the big kind of conversations are right now that are splitting families up. I don't know about in Australia, but I mean, here in America, people they're not talking to family members anymore. This is literally, this is splitting families up in a way that, like, for American history, it hasn't been since the Civil War. And I have seen some news on the ground in Australia that seems like there probably is similar things happening. And so I I mean, it's just so ripe for actually what identity politic, I think I'm just going to be an optimist and say that ultimately, I think that the intention for it was to have a bigger tent where everyone can come and live and be seen and experienced and respected and honored for where they come from and what their choices are and what their sexual orientation is or their gender or their lack thereof, their culture, their race, all of these kinds of things, their age, their nationality, whatever the thing is. I think ultimately that was the original intention. And so part of kind of my mission right now is that I feel, and I do this through the yogic technology and I teach it through the yogic technology, but of course there's many ways to remember the one and to enter into, the kind of one life and one wisdom that animates us all, and our, the truth of that. But I think ultimately that is the core principle of what has now become kind of a bit of a Frankenstein monster. And so the way that I use the yogic technology and teach about it in these times is we have to get smarter. We can't let the kind of constant scroll, constant news, constant media, constant influx of information that we don't know what to do with. We can't let that become something that numbs us and calcifies us and disallows us from intelligent, compassionate, and open discourse. I mean, I don't know, some of you are of the age. Remember when we had like debate teams? Like, remember when like debating was a respectful and dignified and kind of art form? I'm about bringing that back. I'm all about bringing back the debate team because I feel like our youth needs to be, instead of educated in cancel culture, educated in how to have intelligent and open-hearted discourse where everyone's respected and everyone leaves elevated. That's debate team. That was kind of what we used to do on the debate team. Whereas this is an art form. This is an art form to disagree with someone in an artful way. This is something that you practice and you learn. And I think so. This has been. I'm on like a little campaign. We're creating a university and schools, and I'm like, the debate team is going to be a major part of that because I do feel like young people don't know. It's like basically you get one step into something that I disagree with you on, and everyone is reacting and blaming each other and pointing fingers and all this. And so I know many of you are mothers and definitely role models. And so my invitation is that I think there's a how to this. So it's not just a broad stroke, but the neuron, what we call the neuron velocity, has to increase in the human computer, the mind computer, in order to compute the multiple perspectives. So it's not just kind of, this is where like this is where the yogic science kind of moves away from just new age theory. Yes, I want to be open-hearted. Yes, I want to be able to have a more dignified, respectful conversation with someone. Of course, I think all of us really want that, unless you're really on it, unless you're really, that's not, maybe you've made a brand of being not that person, or maybe you do have an axe to grind. But I think ultimately in the human experience, we all want that. But why don't we have that? Why don't we create that with each other? Well, there's a kind of velocity that the human computer is being forced to, especially being in these little screens in front of each other, constantly on technology now. We're being forced to increase the velocity of our neurons in order to handle the weight of the mega information that's happening. And it's, I think, part of where maybe cancel culture and some of the kind of undignified ways that we're treating ourselves and others in terms of difference in belief systems and all of this, I think some of it comes from information overload, where it's just, I can't take in another opinion. So I'm just going to get calcified in my own kind of idea of what's right, what's wrong, and then just, kind of take it to the bank, as it were, which really has happened, hasn't it? So we kind of were into this neuron velocity thing. And I thought that some of you, how many people, anybody here practicing the intelligence meditation with me on Rama TV? No? Okay, great. You are. Good job. I thought I'd teach you the intelligence meditation because it's 11 minutes and it's for this very thing. It's to increase your neuron velocity so that you have a little bit more space to handle, someone else's lived experience or a difference in opinion, or just to have the buffer of prana is what I would call it, which will actually, that's the technology of being able to have a little bit more compassion, is I have enough space to have a little bit of, okay, wait, maybe I'm not, maybe I'm missing something here. Maybe this person is, maybe they have some information I don't have, or whatever the case may be. So I want to teach you the intelligence meditation. We do it every day and have since cancel culture. We have been doing this every day since I guess November 2019. So we started before kind of the real COVID-19 thing hit. And it's profound. So I want you to have this, and you can kind of do with it what you will. But if you wanted to, you could practice it every day between now and it's Equinox. So it's a great time to kind of take on something that is going to be transformative. And it's only 11 minutes. So you could practice it between now and 40 days from now, which I'm not sure what that date is, but somebody who's good at that, you can figure it out. And then you DM me or write me a little note and tell me how what you've experienced, because it's pretty profound, the level of upgrade that the computer gets from this meditation. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Reality Riffing. These are conversations that I think are important with people who are doing great things in the world about subject matters that need to be discussed. If you enjoyed the content, the conversation, please feel free to share with your people, share with your friends and family, rate the podcast below, and also subscribe.